All right, I'm going to introduce our speaker now and get us going. So I'm actually going to introduce Frank Hallowell. Frank is CFO of Image Sensing Systems. And that's it. That's your whole introduction. Come on up.
Good morning. I don't talk as loud as Chad does, so I'm going to try to project if I can. If you can't hear me, let me know. Raise your hand or throw something at me. Again, I'm Frank Hallowell. I've been an FEI member since, I don't know when, last, I forget now, it's been too long. Enjoyed the opportunity to come out. I'd like to introduce Chad Stelzig. I met Chad just over 2 years ago in probably a similar circumstance. You were heading off to Barcelona, and we had to meet in a restaurant to talk about this interesting opportunity called Image Sensing Systems. And the last 2 years have been a fantastic set of changes and challenges, which Chad will get into more here in a few minutes. Chad's background, he's actually a math and physics major, decided to go on to get a master's in engineering, and he spent a lot of his time in designing and creating new products, which I always found interesting, being a financial weenie, looking into all these engineers and stuff like that. Always enjoyed technology, but Chad's been leading a transformation that has probably been described as dynamic and constantly changing, and I hope you will enjoy our discussion today. Chad?
Well, thanks, Frank. All right. And nice to meet all of you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today. I always enjoy talking about the company and our experiences. Hopefully you can take something away from this presentation. Objectives today are pretty clear. I want to inform you of what we do. A lot of people don't know Image Sensing Systems. We're not a consumer brand, yet you interact with our stuff every single day. And really the meat of this presentation is going to revolve around the journey that Frank and I have been on over the past couple of years. It's been interesting and exciting at times. A lot of great stories there around that. And we'll try to blend in or mix in a bit of our approach and what's worked and what hasn't along the way. You know, write down any questions you might have, and at the end we'll hit those. It'd be great to have some further discussions. If any of this is directly relevant to problems you're having, you know, let's set up coffee or lunch someday and talk through it even more. I do have a disclaimer up front in case you look at my LinkedIn profile and the like. I've been with Image Sensing for 10 years, the last 5 as CEO. And after those 10 years, a couple weeks back, I decided it was my time to move on to my next adventure as well. So I'm actually myself in a period of transition. I'm still acting as the CEO of Image Sensing through this transition period, working with Frank, but just for full transparency, that's my background there, where we stand with Image Sensing today. Frank, do you want to read the safe harbor statement? Okay. Yeah, everything we're going to be talking about today, it's primarily retrospective, right? We're talking about things we've done and experiences that we've had. Anything that I do happen to say or suggest about future performance, what's the right language to use there, Frank? I don't want to read it. It's too many words. All right. We're going to avoid forward-looking statements. Okay. Let's get on with this. So how do you know us? Because everyone, I was hoping. I looked at Google Maps this morning early to see how people were going to be driving here. And the problem is that MnDOT still loves inductive loops in the roadway. So you're going to learn a little bit about traffic engineering today, but you see those little squares in the road sometimes? They actually saw cut and they put wire in the road, and that is used to detect vehicles. That's been used since like the 50s, right? It's like 1950s technology. When it works, it works. When it doesn't work at all, right? If the wire is broken. So I was hoping on Highway 55 there would be our product out there, but there isn't. MnDOT still likes their loops. But this is how you probably know us. You see a camera up by the traffic light. If it's a big white camera, it's ours. Our competition, our primary competition camera is more gray in color. Hennepin County, Scott County, St. Paul, these are all users of our product. As you drive around the city, you're going to see these all over the place now. You'll be like, I never used to look up there until I started working at Image Sensing, and now I'm always like, oh, look at that, look at that. It drives my kids nuts when I point this stuff out. I'll get in front of it, and we do not write tickets. We do not do any form of enforcement whatsoever. Our focus is efficiency and safety. So it's a matter of how can we deploy new technology to get the most out of our existing roadways and our aging infrastructure. Another product that you may, probably less likely you've noticed this one. This is actually a interstate in Wisconsin. I used Google Maps again to take a picture of it. That little dot on that pole is one of our radar products. So I blew it up there. It's about yay big, and what this does is this lays a beam down on the road. Vehicles drive through, so we detect the presence of vehicles, so we can count how many vehicles are moving through the area. We can calculate their speed, some classification. All this is important for state DOTs primarily so that they can gather this information. Some of it's used to acquire state funding. Some of it's used for congestion management. So variable message signs when you see, congestion ahead, maybe variable speed limits. All this data that we create gets consumed and is used to, for either data collection or the management of congestion. The third use case I'll bring up here, and this is actually a very meaningful, I guess to me, application of our technology, especially now that my son is 16 years old and driving on the road. What I'm showing here is at the intersection of 2nd and 4th in Minneapolis, so near Pizza Luce, if you can picture that. You actually have an opportunity to go to the intersection, turn left, and drive onto I-94 and become a wrong-way driver. So you see these events on the news every once in a while. And this is so impactful because when you have a wrong-way driving event, it typically ends in fatality, right? These are not minor incidents and minor collisions. So very, very provocative use case. So we deployed our technology to detect the presence of wrong-way drivers. We flash wrong-way driving signs on what would be the off-ramp to notify the driver so that they can self-correct. We also bundle up this data and we send it to a monitoring service so they can validate that it was actually a real event, and then they can dispatch highway patrol and the like to get public safety on scene immediately. And over the last year of this particular deployment, over 100 wrong-way drivers have self-corrected out there. So very impactful, very meaningful. And now another reason you know us that's less exciting, this is our building, Spruce Tree Center. University in Snelling once rated the 4th ugliest building in the entire world, right? You can search this. I'm not making this up. But no, we love the building. It's been great for us, and the management there is wonderful as well. But yeah, 4th ugliest building. Okay. So who we are, we got about 34 employees right now. Our headquarters is in St. Paul, Minnesota, in the green building. We've got an office in Toronto and an office in Barcelona, Spain. Those are primarily sales offices. Got a handful of people there. Mention the markets that we serve: intersection control, highway data collection, incident detection. Our 2020 financials, we were down a bit, as a lot of companies were. Our revenue came in just over $13 million. To understand, if you happen to look at our financials, to understand how the composition of our revenue, we have a royalty component, and that's actually a partner of ours in North America that licenses our technology. They do all the manufacturing, the marketing, the sales, the fulfillment, and then they pay us a royalty based off of the percentage of the gross profit of the sale. So that's been a very profitable business segment for us, probably 60% of our revenue. So it's kind of strange to have a royalty business be that large. The product side then, we sell the radar products globally, right? So we go direct to market with those, as well as selling those cameras internationally. So we control that. So the remainder of our revenue is a mix of those two product offerings. So we see great margins on the royalty side, in excess of 95%. And on the product side, we try to stay above 50% with that, depending on regional market dynamics and commoditization and the like. And we do have we are profitable. We drove about $1.5 million to the bottom line last year in the presence of a pandemic. 30 years of experience, a lot of sensors sold globally in over 70 countries. Just in the US alone, over $500 million of sensors have been sold. Relatively small marketplace that we play in. It's on the orders of hundreds of millions of dollars, not necessarily billions. If you pay the money for a market research summary that maybe some of you guys have done, they'll tell you that it's like a $10 billion market. But in reality, realistically, we're looking in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So I alluded to our mission. It's really to take and create advanced technologies that produces highly accurate, high availability data that can then be consumed and used to make smarter decisions about how our roadways are used. And we're not building a lot more roads, and so we have to make the best use out of our existing infrastructure. So we're at a really neat place right now with some of the recent technology initiatives our development initiatives, that have allowed us to now deploy like machine learning, so artificial intelligence. Everyone's talking about artificial intelligence. We've actually deployed it in real time on these sensors that are deployed. And now the data that we can get on vehicles is no longer the equivalent of this loop of wire in the road, but now we can tell more precisely where it's located, how it's moving, its kinematics, position, speed, all that stuff. So we can start solving these legacy traffic problems in new and creative, more thoughtful ways than we ever have before. So that's exciting for the company. The other thing that we're starting to look at that I'm very interested in is actually using this granular data to begin to model how humans are interacting with the infrastructure, right? So this will allow us to actually, over longer periods of time, model these behaviors and see how they're changing and when these unsafe conditions are starting to surface, right? And if we can get in front of that, you might be able to do more prescriptive measures and treatments to the roadway, signs, lane markings, who knows, to avoid potential safety issues in the future. So a lot of good things coming. Not just from us, but all within the industry itself. It'll be pretty neat future. Now it's story time. So that was now it gets fun. Okay. I'm going to run through 34 years of history in less than 5 minutes because we want to focus on the last 2 years. Company was formed in 1984 by a University of Minnesota professor. His name was Panos Michailopoulos, civil engineering professor. And he tended to be focused on traffic flow theory and how vehicles move and how you optimize traffic and the lights and all of that. And he had the idea of using machine vision as a way to create the data instead of using the loops in the roadway. It's very nice. It's non-intrusive. You don't have to cut the roadway up. It's flexible. You can reconfigure it. All great things. But it's 1984, so the technology isn't necessarily there. It's not inexpensive and small. So fast forward, prototyping is done. And in 1991, he actually lands a deal. Now he needs a product. And so he approaches the partner of ours, Econolite, that's based out of California. And they really harden and productize this autoscope camera. And that's really where the company began. It was in 1991. We're still partners today with the same partner, same agreement, many modifications, but really 30 years later, we still are in agreement with this company. Fast forward again, 1995, he took the company public. The capital that was generated from that was used to reinvest back into some more R&D, as well as take the company internationally. They wanted to go overseas and try to sell into some new markets. So that's 1995. Between 1995 and say 2007, it was just continuous innovation and modification of the product offerings. This is very early days in this intelligent transportation system market. So there was, a lot of greenfield for them to go after. So good years there. Company did quite well. And in 2007, they were sitting on a fair amount of cash. They decided to begin acquisition. So they acquired a company called EIS out of Toronto. They were the equivalent to us. They were the pioneer in the radar space. And so that's how we got into the radar space, was through acquisition in 2007. 2010, we bought a license plate recognition company. Same sort of deal. They were based out of the UK, just north of London. Cool company, cool technology, being able to, imagine a police officer being able to drive through a parking lot and just every single license plate, it's able to detect and read it and run it, cross-check it against the list, and really neat stuff. Long story short, we weren't able to make that ultimately profitable, and had to sell it off in 2015. During that period of time, we were very focused on the license plate recognition, and we took our eye off the ball in terms of our core market space and our technologies, and our financials reflect that as well. So now we're at 2016, and this is the point. I was running engineering, and this is the point where I was appointed interim CEO at the time. We basically had some outdated technology. We still had no debt. We had limited cash, and we were in a position we needed to fix a number of things, right? We needed to focus on profitability. The company hadn't been profitable for a while, so we needed some good financial foundation along with new technology and the like. So that was 2016. We introduced new technology. We arrested the revenue slide that we had seen. We finally got then to 2018, and we decided now we need to start just improving the company in general. We got a profitable company. Now let's create a leadership team that can actually take it to the next level. And that started in 2018 with the hiring of Andy Marquise, now our Senior Vice President of Sales. And then in 2019, with the introduction of Frank, that came in and really took control of our accounting, our finance, our operations, our business services, all these things. he's just done nothing but improve the whole works. So that brings us up to 2019. So in 2019, now we have cash in the bank, we're profitable, we've got 2 of our key executive leadership positions filled, we've got a strong technology roadmap. So life is good. And now let's talk about that journey and what's transpired since 2019. So if you remember 2019, it was a great time. If you think back, you know, there were conferences. We would go to conferences where people were, and we would rent out rooms and give training sessions. A lot of these I always take pictures of my cell phone and kind of nice photo documentary of where we've all been. We traveled around the world. It's great having an office in Barcelona, Spain. You get to go to Barcelona, Spain, right? But no, this is my beautiful wife, Amy, right? And she's drinking a coffee and a giant beer at the same time. She's like that. She's crazy. This is a picture I took here. Have you ever been in the position where you look at your Delta app and you're like, I'm #1 on the upgrade list for first class. And then you look and it says seats remaining, 0. And oh well. Yeah, and we were searching for a new office space. Our lease was going to expire in July of 2020. We formed a committee, we spec'd out the space we need, we looked at different properties, everyone's excited. Strategic planning meetings down there. Here's Frank's forehead right up there. He's kind of hiding behind there. We let him join. We let the CFO into our strategic planning meetings. All right, so we had a compelling story and great energy going into 2020. It really was. It was probably the high point of the 10 years that I've been with the company, was that feeling going into 2020. We felt great. It was awesome. All right. Now, challenge number 1 in January, the exploration of strategic alternatives to maximize shareholder value, which is jargon for, anyone? What are you doing if you put that in there? Selling the company, right? And so this is the first challenge. So now we come into 2020, all the employees are all fired up, and I have to stand in front of a room of people and explain this to them. But I always explain it to them in the most positive light. This could be a great thing for us. And the bonus, if you're going to be potentially selling the company, do you want to enter into a 7? You don't want to enter into a lease. So all that energy around, hey, we're going to get a new building or a new lease space, that kind of was deflated. So that's how the year started. What did we learn from that? This first one's key for those of you especially that get in front of groups of people and talk or have an opportunity to communicate to your company on a regular basis. You got to make sure you communicate, and you have to do it regularly, because anytime there is a vacuum, anytime there's a lack of information and communication, it gets filled with negativity and anxiety, right? No one has ever said, I don't know what's going on, but I'm sure it's great, you know? It's true. I've been in the seat. I've been looking at the guy telling me this stuff. So yeah, and I said be transparent as possible, but I italicized transparent. I think I'm going to replace that in the future with authentic. You got to be authentic with your people, because you can be transparent and artificial, and it doesn't matter. You got to be authentic. So that was a lesson that I learned, and just driving a positive message, because there is positive outcomes for all of these things. Every single one of them, there's a positive outcome. And I just wanted to point, I've mentioned it a couple times, our property management over there at Spruce Tree Center was wonderful and willing to extend our lease for another year, which was actually great timing for us with all the stuff going on and the upcoming, you know what happened here shortly. But wait, there's more. So this is actually taken at Highland Park Lifetime Fitness on Friday the 13th. I used to stop there and lift on my way into work. This is normally like 50 people just jammed. Like you can't bench press because you got to wait for someone. There was no one there. And I'm like, oh man, this isn't good. Not good. And so that's obviously the weekend that we're all trying to figure out how do you go remote. So that was some turbulent times there. So challenge number 2, global pandemic, remote work for all. And this third point here, because I think everyone in this room was dealing with that. And the post-apocalyptic business plan is what I called it. And that's really the point here, that you got to plan for the worst and hope for the best as well, because I was sitting at Lutzen in the trees in a cabin that I rented for spring break with my family, looking at Frank and the senior vice president of sales through my computer screen, talking about who we're going to lay off when if we don't get revenues. It was depressing. Jeez, it was depressing. It was awful. But you have to do it, right? It would be irresponsible to just be blind and just go whistling off a cliff. So plan for the worst, have those tough discussions, get together the people that you trust and work through that plan. So we worked through, with Frank's help, worked through several financial models of how we would actually wind this thing down, because we didn't know. We sell into the transportation space. What if they stop buying? No one's driving. What if what do you do? We were fortunate that we had cash in the bank and we had some pretty good discipline around the financials of the business, but scary times, and I feel fortunate that we were in the position we were. All right. But wait, there's more. This one I don't have speaking points, but it's just kind of drives the point home of what a tough year we have all had. I woke up on May 29th. It was 8:04 in the morning, turned on the news. The first thing I see is our building. This is our building back there, right? And there's fire trucks and there's smoke. And I literally have to call the landlord. Is our building on fire? Like, after all this stuff is going on top of selling the company, on top of a global pandemic, I wake up and think our building is on fire. So just added that in there. It was just a tough year. It was a tough year for all of us. Okay, now let's move into challenge number 4. So August 2020, coming out of a board meeting, and Frank and myself were challenged to explore expanding into India. The vast majority of our employees are engineers. We specialize in high-tech development, right? Engineers are not cheap. Good engineers, they're worth what you pay them, but they're not inexpensive. So what can we do to create some incremental capacity on the development side without blowing up the P&L, all right? So what can we do? We can outsource, we could go through different consulting companies. What if, we were challenged, what if we actually open an office in India, hire our own employees, make them our own, and they're part of the team, and they're an extension. They're an extension of the team here in St. Paul. So we went forward with that, and just as of this past week, it literally took about a year to get this into place. We were just now incorporated into India. And what we learned here, I learned myself, is to keep an open mind. Because you get asked to do something like this, your immediate knee-jerk reaction might not be positive, right? I like engineers in Minnesota. Well, no, if we can't afford to hire more engineers, how are we going to grow and create the technologies required? Well, we need alternatives, hence something like this. Choice of language is key. This is the same with the strategic alternatives case, choosing that language. You notice I said we're not outsourcing. We're not outsourcing our work. It's going to be a remote office. It's going to be an extension of our team. They will be part of our team. When we have all-hands meetings, you will see them on the screen, which is very important. And along with engineering leadership, I've challenged them. This is an opportunity to learn and grow and develop. If you have never been part of this type of activity, this is the opportunity to learn how it works. How do you do it well? How do you integrate people from halfway around the world into your team and have it be productive? And engage local experts and allow plenty of time to complete and file forms. That's one you added, Frank, because I know you had the brunt of the paperwork on this one. I didn't have to endure some of what you did. Any other?
If you think it would take a week, it takes about 4 months. So in a pandemic, and the process is straightforward, but just very time consuming. 13 hours ahead of you, so dealing with government agencies here in the U.S. can be time consuming, but over there it was months to get the process going.
Yeah, it was a process. We always wanted to go very, very quickly, but to do it right, do it properly, which is the way that Frank did it. It takes time, but in the end, it'll be better. It'll be more consistent and more predictable. This brings us to Q4 of 2020. All right, so we started the sale process right before the pandemic. I think maybe we had one presentation for sure. I don't know if we got 2 in. Otherwise, they were all in. We had 2 face-to-face, and the rest were all over Zoom and whatnot. But just the fact that you had your uncertainty around future revenue projections makes it difficult to have some of those conversations. So we decided to terminate that sale process that happened late October, early November timeframe. And with that came at that point, then did come some resignations. We've never had image sensing has never had an issue with employee retention. This was the first year where I actually had a few people leave on their own, which was something new for me. Later slide, we'll talk a bit about, I'll focus in on the retention aspects and what we've done. But we did experience that. And then what we did is we had to take a hard look. What do we do now, right? We are coming out of a sale process. We're in the middle of a pandemic. What do we need to do? And this is to my point. If If you have multiple business segments, evaluate each independently for profitability. We sharpened the pencil and looked at, we've got the royalty business, which is highly profitable, and then we've got these product lines, and really taking an honest look at each of those segments, because collectively, we have profitability, and we have free cash flow, and all is well. You start looking at them independently, and then suddenly you start to expose where you have inefficiencies, and what changes do you need to make. And so we created some goals for this year in order to bring all of our business segments back into profitability. And with that, we did have to do some restructuring. And so we took care of that at the end of the year. We wanted to do that at the end of the year to just start 2021 with a fresh slate, right? Get all that behind us and move forward. We did have retention bonuses on some key employees, and one of those guys did leave. So retention bonuses don't always work. And there just comes a point where you can only do so much and you have to accept change and move forward. So definitely professionally and personal growth year for this guy. Let's see here. How many challenges are there? Do you remember? You added some more at the end. I think I was up to 8. I don't know. Okay, so now we're at Q1. It's 2021. So we still need an office. Remember I said we had a 1-year extension on our lease. The landlord was great. But now we've got to find a new office space by July 2021. So we need an office. So we re-engage our real estate representatives. We re-engage the committee that we put together to go explore properties. And we present all those findings, and they say, have you ever thought about buying a building? You know, we've got cash in the bank. What if we were to go buy a building? Maybe now's the right time. Some of the property values being depressed. So we went ahead and then looked at properties. And one of the properties we found was this building here. It's over in Minneapolis, off of Hennepin. If you know where Butcher and the Boar is, it's right next door to Butcher and the Boar, between 11th and 12th on Hennepin. Great location, right down from the theater district. I like that side of Minneapolis, and they've been really good to work with. And so we are actually proceeding with purchasing a property. So instead of leasing, now we're going to buy a property. And the way we got there is, I don't know how many different models, Frank, you put together, how many different ways we looked at the financials, but it was a bit eye-opening at the end of the day, because I never would have thought that buying a building was even in our cards. And when in fact, when you look at the total ownership cost of this, we're money ahead at the end, especially after a handful of years if we were to sell that off and still do some leasing program with the new owner. So it's great. Another education experience there for me. Yeah. And involve your employees in major decisions as appropriate, right? I've always been one, I remember when we first engaged, we used Cressa as representatives, and we showed up with like 6 people, and they're like, what's this? I'm like, well, these are our employees. Well, normally it's just like the CEO and the CFO show up and look at the space. I'm like, well, who knows? I might not be here tomorrow. I would think that you'd want the people that are going to use the space to be part of that decision process. So highly encourage that if you have any of those decisions coming up. It can backfire though, right? Because as we had to delay, you get everybody excited. And so that's the downside. But if you stay authentic with your communication, people will understand. All right, now's where Frank gets to do some talking, because now we're on to some topics that he was definitely leading the charge on. So I'll let you speak to these.
Thank you, Chad. Can you hear me? Yes. All right, good. I'll try to be louder and less pacey than Chad does. So if you're bored and you've got a building underway, let's form a holding company. Primary reason for the holding company is we've been a small cap space for almost 25 years. If you look at our stock, we don't necessarily promote it. So the challenge and opportunity here is how can we take advantage of what we're planning to do with more acquisitions and technology, expand into India, as well as open a new office space to re-engage our employees. And the formation of the holding company actually allowed us to do that. We got obviously some paper in the press. We watched our share price; it did go up. We did also go to a dividend pay model. We've not paid a dividend, and we've moved to a dividend pay. So it's recognizing those shareholders that have stayed with us and are continuing to invest. So the primary reason for forming a holding company was to get our name out there and attract more interest. The big thing we're attempting to do is actually acquire companies complementary to what we've already done. So keep the base business, which is profitable in a good marketplace here today, stable characteristics, and add on to it in bite-sized pieces. And again, forming a holding company allows us to explore a number of different technical options to acquire companies. I can say doing it with remote, with only 2 employees and a bunch of attorneys, and getting tax people involved is probably the biggest challenge, because I've read a lot of legal agreements in my career, but reading these were interesting because I learned that the tax memo for our NOL carry forward was 47 pages long. Nobody said that I think you're going to preserve it, but it took 47 pages in 3 months. So it was a dynamic experience here. What we learned again is to leverage experts that really know how to do that. So our attorneys and our financial advisors really kind of helped us through the process. Identify everything up front, because when you have 2 companies, we've been around for 25 years, you have 2 of everything now. And if you don't set them up, your shares may not trade the next day if you're not set up on DTCC. So remember that. So you have to stop the process a couple times because I wasn't quite set up correctly. It was a flip of a switch, but it took 3 days to fix. Again, allow plenty of time for unforeseen. We had announced this in April. We probably were going to go flip the switch 4 times, but we had to stop it and revisit it each time we ran into an issue. So if you ever plan to do this, give me a call. I can try to talk you out of it. It's a fascinating process. It's like trying to change a tire on a moving car. But we did it, and I think it's going to be exciting for us going forward.
What's next there?
What's next?
Yeah.
What do we have? How do I move it?
No, you got to turn it. No, the other, the right-handed, right? That's yours.
He does this a lot.
There, now get back out there and talk about it.
Casual. The next thing we decided to do, we lost several people in our organization. We did not necessarily have an HR competency. We had a consultant, but it was mostly on the tactical side of hiring and benefits administration. And while we were forming a holding company, we did an evaluation to see, well, where do we need? We need HR talent, but we're only 35 people. And so we decided to engage with a PEO that would replace essentially a professional employers organization. They took over payroll and benefits, as well as are providing us kind of those baseline policies and procedures, if you will, guides to actually attract and retain employees. So we actually lowered our cost of administration by not replacing the position. I provided a benefit plan that's probably 20% less than what we're currently paying. Went from a self-funded, if you're all familiar with self-funded plans, to a pretty robust. The employees are really excited about it. As well as it gives us a platform to scale. So if I needed to do a background check on our latest hire we had, I called the service rather than having to do it myself. So anyone that's in a small company space, engaging a PEO is a way for us to actually create the basis to grow and develop faster. I don't advise doing it when you're doing a post-sale, post-mortem, doing a transformation, leasing or buying a new building, but it's something we also try to actually use to retain employees. So they're pretty excited about this, and I think it's going to pay dividends in the future.
All right. Thanks, Frank.
I think we're getting there. I think 9 might be the end. And we talk about some other stuff. Here I just summarized Q2 and Q3. I know there was mention of like hybrid return to work. How did we do it? So on and so forth. So in June, we asked people to start returning to the office 2 days a week. And in June, it was fairly informal. Come in as you're comfortable, as you see fit. We made sure that we were present in the office for those days. We established which days we want people in on. And then that became more formal, I want to say late July, early August, where now on Mondays and Thursdays, we expect everyone in St. Paul to be in the office. Wednesday's like a flex day for us. So if you need to be in the office for some additional reason, let's do that on Wednesday. And we don't expect much of anything going on in the office between Tuesday and Friday. We're fortunate in that the vast majority of our employees are sitting behind a computer, behind a laptop, writing software. We have a handful of engineers that are doing like hardware development where they need to actually have physical access to things. We make accommodations. And we also make, because we're small, we can do some of this as well, where it's, if you have a personal reason you want to stay home, let us know. Just let us know. We'll work through it. We'll be reasonable. One thing I did, and it's kind of neat and something you can have your marketing or HR team do, is every once in a while send surveys out. You got to be careful not to over-survey people. They get a little tired of it after a while. One of the surveys I did early in the year, this might have been in January, it was like, what do you miss about not being in the office? And then they responded, and I wanted like one-word answers. And then there's a program online, you just dump that in as a text file, and it'll spit out this word cloud. And so the bigger the words, the more often it was used, right? And it was pretty cool, because it all came back. It was coworkers and team interaction, surprisingly, meetings, right? But it was kind of a neat way to allow them to visualize their responses in a more creative way. So, and that's what we're seeing. You come back on Mondays, and Thursdays in the office. That's when they have more of the bigger, more impactful meetings. Hold those, in person, face to face, and the rest of the time we interact through Teams and the like. Then also supply chain disruption. I don't know who all here. I'm sure everyone is. I shouldn't ask who. Everyone is affected by supply chain disruptions. For us, biggest impact, well, I guess there's two impacts. One of them is procurement of electrical components, semiconductors and the like, right? Because we still build physical, tangible product. So what's benefited us is that we recently onboarded a brand new director of operations who comes from a previous operations role where he demonstrated some really good success. He has come in and quickly been able to provide more transparency and visibility into these supply chain disruption problems and how it may affect us. And it's been a world of difference. That's been great. Second thing is actually labor shortages in the market itself, where contractors that work for state DOTs or do the installations and the like, it's hard to find labor right now. So we're seeing some of the projects slip a little bit and push out. So those are two ways. Don't blindly trust. If anyone here is leveraging contract manufacturers or outsourcing purchasing, anything like that, trust but verify. We still go out and do our own searches for components to make sure that there's going to be that we can go somewhere, even if it's a broker. I think in one case we needed a $24 part, and we found it, and they wanted $1,600 for it, right? And one thing we've learned over the years too, if you ever find yourself in a position like that, sometimes by just submitting a PO, give them more than the usual price of 24, but say, I'll give you $50 and I want 1,000 of them. Sometimes they'll come around. This particular broker was like, nope, $1,600. We're like, we'll find another one. So yeah, operations experience is priceless. Then reconsider your pricing models. I think now's a great time. Everything's getting more expensive. Freight's getting more expensive. I was talking to someone that's in sort of a global distribution business, and he said usually he spends $375,000 a year on freight. This year he spent $375,000 by March. So he's going to spend over $1 million in freight charges this year. So now is the time to reconsider it, get in front of it. I think the customers will understand because everyone is exposed to this. This is not industry or market segment specific. So in summary, from this journey, we evaluated strategic alternatives. I should say we're surviving. We're surviving a global pandemic. We changed our office work model twice from in-person to remote to now hybrid. We extended an office lease twice. Frank completed a holding company reorganization. We've now opened a subsidiary in India. We're purchasing an office building. We moved to a PEO. We're evaluating companies to acquire and navigating supply chain disruptions, and that was all since January of 2020. So couldn't have done it with that guy over there. He's been amazing, and I should say to all of you, the importance of your role. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO or a CFO or a COO. It's really teamwork, and that's what I focused on, is creating a great team and people that I want to be with and hang out with as well, because there's so many topics you can't discuss with other people. So make sure, hopefully you all feel appreciated. I'm not going to ask Frank if he feels appreciated. You feel appreciated, don't you? No, it's been great, and you all are filling a great need, and so just own it and go after it with all kinds of energy, because it can be fun. The last topic was employee retention. I think this is my last slide, because I guess my transition was the fact that we went through all this stuff and largely did not have a lot of retention issues. We started to see it in 2020 after the completion of the sale process. And a few people, you get one person that leaves and then a couple more leave type of a thing. But by and large, we've done a good job with retention. And I've reflected on this a fair amount, like what drives this, because we do, all things considered, have a nice, vibrant culture here in St. Paul. So we went through an activity in 2018, and this is nothing revolutionary. This is stuff that maybe you've been through. We did not invent this, but I can tell you it works. It works if you do it right and you give it the time and attention that it deserves. And so I got my management team together, and I pulled in a couple of additional people that I viewed as influencers within the company. So these were, they weren't managers. It could just well have been the janitor. I just wanted people that other people recognize as being influential, and they have a voice. They're not afraid to talk in a meeting setting. I gave them all a piece of paper, and I said, write down 3 names of people that if we could duplicate them, the company would be better. Like the culture would be better, we'd be more successful, we'd be more efficient, whatever. So I all went through and they did that. They gave me the pieces of paper, and I expected to see like, I don't know, 5 names. We're a small company, right? I'm guessing there'd be like the 5 same people. Like, oh yeah, it's, you know, Jimbo's, I was the one. But no, it was like 10 people within the company. That was pretty cool. So I wrote them down on the board, whiteboard, and then we just went one by one and started asking people to just shout out just words. Describe this person, which we did. And that's kind of this blue cloud here, everything from humble to motivated. One of our sales guys was referred to as a bulldog. He just goes and goes and goes. Team player, calm demeanor, all these things. And we took those then and we just started breaking them down, kind of distilling them, right? I wanted to get down to 6 things, no more than 6 things. Really the characteristics or the attributes that define, because this is really definition of someone that is successful at image sensing systems. And this will be different for different places. I didn't want to just ram company values down the employees' throats. I wanted it to be more meaningful and have something tangible to tie it to. And so we distilled and distilled and distilled, and we came up with these 6 things. And I encourage you guys to do the same if you've not done this. Maybe it's this time of year is a great time to do it as part of strategic planning. But we came up with our best employees and our successful employees. These are people that hang around. They are positive because they believe in it. We solve a lot of difficult problems. We do things that have not been done before, and they're not easy. So you got to believe you can do it. You got to be willing to go get it, take the initiative to go get it. This 3rd one for us is probably the one that results in the most employee turnover and probably imposed by the company, is the objectivity piece, not having people that are able to sit in a room and be challenged, right? The people that once you challenge their ideas, they get all defensive, and now put that person in a room of like 20 introverted engineers and the room just goes silent, right? There's no discussion. So objectivity is a big one for success at image sensing systems. Some of our projects take a long time. We had development efforts that last nearly 2 years. So you have to stay motivated. You have to keep your foot on the gas. We need people that hold themselves accountable. A lot of people talk about accountability and holding people accountable. I like employees that hold themselves accountable, and for the good and the bad, and even the things they don't have any control of, right? So don't make excuses about market conditions today due to supply chain disruptions. Just own it. It is what it is. Let's figure out how to get through this together. Let's not hide it and delay it. And lastly, we need employees that are enthusiastic. We love to celebrate things. At Image Sensing Systems, the big and the small, it could be a software release, or it could just be periodically throughout the year. You know, we went to Britt's Pub 2 weeks ago, rented out the rooftop, and did lawn bowling tournament, right? A little open bar and some lawn bowling. These are not huge investments. Now we're small and we're afforded some of these opportunities, but for a few $1,000s you can pull people together. And I think the reason that one of the key parts to the retention for us has been celebrating things, because I heard something clicked. I ride a fair amount of bike, and I was listening to some podcasts, and some guy was talking about Disney World and the fact that when you go to Disney World, you're miserable like 60% of the time, right? Because you're stuck in line, you got your kids, they're whining, you're like paying $12 for a hot dog. You would be happier on your couch at home watching ESPN than being at Disney World, but you're paying just big bucks, right? So you're miserable over half the time at Disney World, yet Christmas comes around, you send out the Christmas card, and what picture goes on there? Your trip to Disney World, right? And why is that? It's because of those little things, right? It's not the fact you're standing in line miserable, it's the fact that the kids, you had those little things. You had your daughter getting made up like a princess and this and that. You had the different rides and all these experiences. And those are the things you don't forget. Like, what did we do last Tuesday? What did we do, Frank? You remember? I don't. Because but I remember going to Britt's Pub. I remember celebrating pedestrian detection being launched. All these little things, and these aren't big events. That's what your employees remember, and that's what keeps them around. So this is a big one. You want people that have energy and are enthusiastic, and as a company, do well by them and celebrate those small things. That's my retention pitch. And that's all I got. So I think we're good on time.
This is where it gets fun.
So when you went to India, You know, I think that would be really challenging working with another culture. So how has that been going? And what would you do anything different, or what's been successful?
So what we've done, so we just got incorporated literally within the last few days. We have our first employee in a holding pattern. We interviewed him and wanted to extend an offer literally a couple months ago, but we didn't. The process was taking a long time, so he's been waiting. So what we have done, so we haven't addressed, or I can't say with confidence that we've cracked that nut, but what we did is I hired a new VP of engineering at the beginning of this year, and one of the criteria in that hiring process was someone that has previous experience building a team in India, has previous experience operating a team and interacting with a team in India. So they come in with their playbook already. Because I was honest with the board, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I've run engineering in the past, but I don't know how to do this. And so we were very purposeful with our hiring is one thing we did up front. We'll see how it goes. I have every confidence that he's going to knock it out of the park, though.
Why did you decide India versus all the other options in the world?
Yep. We chose India because of an individual that had already had a presence in India. At an aspect of their engineering development. So this individual is already there, had experienced it, actually had the office space and had some resources that we've tapped into from like a hiring standpoint. So we've leveraged their network in India to ease the setup, if you will. That was really the motivating factor, because you could have, I mean, we used to have an office in Romania as well we shut down a couple years back, and I explored software development there. That's another great region. But we just already had, in a way, we had resources in place and help. So it removed some of the risk.
How does the potential move or the migration toward driverless vehicles play into your strong suit?
Sure. So first off, when you talk about like level 5 automation, like 100% self-driving, I think we're still a ways off from that. The near-term benefits that the industry and users of roadways are seeing is the vehicles that are already transmitting their data, their location data. So you can actually subscribe to some of these data feeds and integrate those back into the infrastructure and the data that's being created by infrastructure sensors to enrich it. Like some of this data will tell you hard braking events, hard accelerations, windshield wipers are turned on or off, seat belts fastened. Like there's a whole other layer of data now that's becoming available that if you're creative with it, I think you can incorporate that into the traditional sort of legacy data provided to state DOTs and give them deeper insights onto really what's going on in the roadway. So that's I think the near term, 3 to 5 year situation. If you go to some of the more research-oriented conferences, people will say there will come a time where there will be no traffic lights, right? It'll all be these vehicles interacting with each other and negotiating the movements at intersections and so forth. But I think near term, it's really leveraging the data that's being produced at increasing levels every year.
So how much does one of your products cost? I'm sure it depends on scales, and what size of orders do you see?
Sure. From a sales standpoint, without getting into the details, that's on the order for an individual approach, several thousands of dollars. So for an intersection, you're talking north of 10 grand per intersection on up, depending on what the customer wants. And then orders really completely dependent on the size of the customer. I mean, it could be a small city with only 2 intersections. It could be the city of St. Paul, with tens of intersections. So we see everything from $10,000 to $20,000 all the way up to $1 million or more.
Can you speak to the design of your hybrid workforce strategy and how your team has responded to that, the 2 days in the office full time, and feedback you've gotten from your team members, and just kind of how that's impacted your culture?
Sure. So First off, because we ran a survey just a couple weeks back, no one wants to come back 5 days a week, right? It's 2 days or it's 3 days. It looks like that's the sweet spot. In terms of sort of that model or how we set that up, we leverage Microsoft Teams and we encourage that to be used extensively. There was a period of time where there was more text messaging and the like going back and forth. I think now, for the most part, everyone is leveraging Teams and leveraging it successfully. What else have we done? So I talked about the 2 days a week, the encouragement of having the more impactful meetings that would be more impactful if you're face-to-face. Schedule those for the in-person days, and other people will become aware of if there's going to be a large group of people hanging out, that they'll know to just shift their work as well. But it's resonated well with the employees. I don't know, beyond that, Frank, anything come to mind specific that we've done?
If you're buying a building or at least a building, use that opportunity because it's going to be a physical move. We've been in the building 25 years, but a physical move like that, engage the employees. They're setting up how they want it to look because they want it open. So we're taking down cubes and walls. We're putting in more technology and the like. So engage the employees if you're going to face a major change like a move.
Did your employees have much feedback about moving to downtown Minneapolis?
Yes, they did. We're small enough. We're small enough that we did look at properties with the help of our advisor, Gus, helped us out here in finding, and we did the zip code analysis. We knew where a lot of the employees worked. So we got feedback as to, we know we couldn't go too far out without losing employees, so we knew we had to stay in the core between the two cities. And I think it's fortunate for us, most of our employees are actually in the core. They're not like myself or Chad who live out in the cornfields here.
So I guess that my question is more targeted to safety. You certainly on University Avenue, you guys saw a lot of stuff in May of 20. What do your employees feel about going downtown?
It's positive. It has been positive. I can say that with confidence. And that was one of my concerns when we announced that that was going to be where we would land, just because all the events that have transpired over the past year. I think the property that we selected has something to do with the positivity that was received, because we are out towards more that west end of Hennepin, a lot of bars, a lot of restaurants. Our employee base, I mean, we're under 35 for the most part. It's a younger group of individuals that want to go out and go for walks. They want to bike into work or take public transportation, check those boxes. They want something to do after work. For instance, they used to, well, they still do, truly do enjoy working together, and now to have an opportunity to go to other restaurants. There's not a lot of offering in terms of entertainment nearby where we're at currently.
But it is a good-looking building.
Great looking building. Anyone else?
Chad, talk a little bit about the technology that saves lives, that wrong way detection. Where do you see, and here I'm asking you forward-looking information, so we'll put all those same caveats up. But talk a little bit about how you approach cities with that opportunity, if you will.
Exactly. So the right way to approach a city with that opportunity is to do your homework first and understand if they've had an issue with wrong-way drivers, because it's not everywhere. There tends to be certain states, Florida, Arizona in particular. It has to do in some regards with the age of the population, and then after that, it would be, the impaired driving and the like. So there's certain states that have a higher occurrence of wrong-way driving. I think after that, you do the research, whatever you can get your hands on in terms of where these events occur, because they don't know, and they likely can't afford to put a system at every single off-ramp, because that's where people are getting on the wrong way. And so anything you can do to look at past incidents to try to isolate where those incidents have occurred and then come with them with that information, because they likely have not had the time to actually do that work themselves. They've got all kinds of other stuff going on. So if you can make your case for a compelling safety issue in your city, and here's how we're going to go about solving it, that'll get you in the door and get that conversation started. Right now, a lot of companies are just throwing more and more technology at the problem, which drives up the cost, which drives down the scalability. Okay, and so I think a long-term play, a successful long-term play, is to try to solve it with the minimal amount of technology at the edge, just enough to detect that something perhaps was going the wrong way, maybe high sensitivity, low accuracy. So you might get a lot of false detections, let's say. But then to have the additional intelligence be placed, say, in the cloud. So if you can get that information quickly enough up to the cloud, running more complicated analytics, because then in the cloud you can scale that much more easily than throwing hardware at it. And then you can keep that cost down and maybe go in with different sales models then where they're not even buying the hardware, but instead they are buying, it's more of a subscription, and then you've got the recurring revenue play and everybody's happy. So I think long term, that would be a dream of mine.
Great. We could do one more question. I want to make sure we get out of here on time. Is there a final question for Chad or Frank?
Sure. So just kind of curious about your capital structure. I mean, you talked about you don't necessarily haven't promoted yourself as a smaller cap stock. So when you went through all this assessment of sale, no sale, holding company, why stay public instead of doing something more privatizing?
It's a great one. You got insider on that one? I'd love to be private, quite frankly.
It's a little bit of why I asked that
When I first
question.
met Chad, it was you're public, whether you're public. But it's been explored. I think there's certainly be a preference from our major investors as well as the shareholders for that to change. The challenge is, how do you do that? We have obviously the ability to repurchase shares, but that doesn't necessarily get you there. I think that after extensive evaluation that came out of the sales process, that it was probably best for us to continue to grow and get larger before we look at those type of options, because we're kind of stuck in that small space with cash, no debt, a limited following, a fairly illiquid stock here. It's better for us to continue to invest, maybe dividend back some from time to time here to keep the interest and to try to go through the process of going private.
Great. I think on that we're going to end. Thank you everybody for coming. I hope to see you in the next couple weeks at our future events.